I want to pivot to House of David. The show, we kind of teased this last week. This is very relevant to me.
Loved it.
Very relevant to me because I'm teaching through Samuel.
Y'all took notes?
Oh, I took. I've got 3 pages. Of notes
I've got
here.
2 pages of notes.
Yeah. So no.
I have none.
You're just gonna wing it. That's what you do, man.
I know. I'm good at it.
Yeah.
That's why we like you, Justin.
That might be
You're a wing.
debated if you're good at it or not, but that's definitely what you do. So before, I really felt like it would be important to have a different discussion before we talk about House of David. And that discussion is I want to establish what I'm going to call rules for creative license. And by the way, this will be specific regarding the biblical canon. I think, Creighton, you'll find this interesting. I think that these are important rules for creative license dealing with any canon. Like, as I was working my way through, this is just applicable to all of the atrocities that's happened as a result of Star Wars.
We've talked about this, and I feel very strongly about this particular topic.
Yes.
We talked about it some last week because of Wheel of Time, which Amazon also did.
And
I'm
ruined.
guessing they broke a lot of the things you did, and yes, ruined.
Yeah, so I think that there is a broader conversation about like rules for creative license dealing with any canon. Like if you're going to make an adaptation of The Lord of the Rings, follow these rules. We're going to address them specifically from the biblical canon. But this is a much broader idea. If there are any things, I got my Sharpie with me. So I'm going to go through these rules. If there are anything that you guys want to add to this, and we're going to do this before we get to the show, our feedback on the show. And if you watching, as I go through these, if you want to add, if you think that something should be added to this list, we're going to do this as a show. Or if you're thinking about it, again, you can email us, let us know what your thoughts are. If something else is added, popecreighton@gmail.com. So I'm going to go, I got 5 of them. Okay, I got 5 rules, and then I got some okays. So I had to try to figure out the best way to do this. So 1, the number 1 rule for creative license, if you're developing a TV show, as a preacher, I was a middle school pastor for 10 years, a high school pastor for 10 years. I taught a Bible class for 14 years to non-Christians. I had to develop a particular style of making the familiar engaging. And that required employing a little creative license. And I learned how to do this. It comes across in my preaching. I try to make stories come alive. I try to help the text become a bit more 3-dimensional, especially stories where right off the bat, everyone thinks, oh, I already know that story. It's like, maybe you don't. And I've tried to employ this in my own preaching style. It comes back to the influences of Gail Irwin. There were some great influences in my life that really forced me into this direction. The number 1 rule with any type of creative license is do not contradict the biblical narrative. No matter what you do, don't contradict the biblical narrative, which means you have to kind of avoid, like if you're the one crafting the story, you have to avoid like allowing some personal agenda to taint your perspective. You've got to keep the main thing the main thing. And this includes chronology. You need to avoid untruths in your employing of creative license. A great example of a violation of this that to me really irks me, and it's an unforced error, and it's just annoying. And that is, I have a lot of wonderful feelings towards The Chosen. But one of the things The Chosen is terrible at is biblical chronology. There's like, and it is unforced errors that, like, you just have to read the Bible. A basic harmony of the Gospels will help you avoid this. But like, there are things placed creatively that are just non-biblical. And as a result, they take away the credibility, the credence, and they mess with like just this course, like the substance of it. So do not contradict the biblical narrative. If the Bible doesn't say something, and there's the old adage, where the Bible puts a period, let no man put a question mark. I'm gonna try to avoid like giving examples from House of David because we're gonna get into it. But as I'm going through this, you're already thinking, I know you are, Creighton, of examples of this. So first, don't contradict the biblical narrative. Let the Bible say what the Bible wants to say. You can be creative. You can have creative license. You can do some things. Just don't mess with what the Bible's saying. Noah, the thing that they did with Noah violates this all over the place. Moses, Charlton Heston, great job. The new Moses with whatever his name was, Russell Crowe, violated this. Don't mess with the story. Let the Bible be the Bible. It's good enough. You don't have to change it. 2, I originally wrote don't. I crossed that out. I said, be careful. Be careful taking license with central storylines, plots, or character profiles. Now, I don't say don't. Originally, I wrote don't mess with central storylines, plots, or character profiles. But I changed it. Be careful in taking license with. I think there's some room for certain things, but like with central storylines or with like core biblical plots or even with like central character profiles, like don't try to get novel with Jesus or Mary. Again, be careful.
Don't try and get novel with Mary. Unlike that Mary movie that came out where the tagline was, "You think you know my story, you don't."
Exactly.
Like, what are you doing?
No, it's like, we do know your story. Don't do that. Like, be careful when you're taking license with like the central thing. Okay. 3, have a credible basis for the creative license. So if you're going to use some creative license, again, don't mess with the biblical narrative. Be careful messing with anything central. But if you're going to employ creative license, have a basis for it. Now, ultimately, the gold standard should be some type of parallel biblical anecdote, passage, concept. Like if the Bible itself can give you room or some direction for a little creative license, at least you can do something and you can point back to some like biblical justification for it. Like have a reason. Don't just do stuff to just be creative. Have a reason for it. So the gold standard is have a biblical reason. But even then, like if you're going to do something, make sure that there's, again, and I made the have, originally I said have some basis. I changed it, have a credible basis. So like, let's say there's a religious tradition regarding a biblical character that's not in the Bible. And you want to maybe employ that in your telling of a story or your teaching of a passage or a person. If it's not in the Bible, if it's in the Bible and you can make a connection, great, gold standard. If there's a religious tradition and you want to kind of use it, you need to make sure it's a credible biblical tradition. That's where the Mary thing, it was a complete.
It's a fabrication. It's a hoax book.
It's a known hoax book. If you want to employ certain observations from Josephus, who's a first century historian, fairly reliable. Again, you don't want to use these things to screw with like storylines or central characters, but you want to add some creative texture and you want to use some solid, credible religious traditions, the Talmud, the Mishnah. Again, there's some wackiness to that. You got to be careful. Even the apocryphal texts, like there's some things you can pull from the histories that give some context. I've done that. In teaching through the Jesus coming in with the palm branches, the triumphal entry of Christ. When I teach it, I actually will use So some rabbinical tradition is they would use donkeys to bring in the spotless lamb so they wouldn't be damaged. Adds a whole new wrinkle to Jesus being the only human being riding on a donkey going into Jerusalem for Passover. That's not in the biblical text, but there's a solid religious tradition that adds an element. They're waving palm branches. What's the significance of that? Well, apocryphal books, the Maccabees, the palm branch was the symbol of revolution. That was a historical thing. Now, the Bible doesn't say it, but you can employ that to add some texture, to have some creative license. Cultural norms, archaeological understanding, congruent histories. Again, just make sure that it's substantial, it's credible. So 3, have a credible basis for the creative license that you employ. I underline, you can't make stuff up out of thin air. Don't do it. It erodes the audience's confidence in the story that you're telling. 4, ensure creative additions enhance core storylines and don't distract or become central features on their own. Again, I'll use The Chosen as an example. There's this entire backstory that they roll out regarding Thomas. You know, I really didn't have much of a problem with it because it was a secondary, third. It was more on the peripheral of the story. It was adding some texture. Again, there was no credible basis for it. We have no reason to believe that Thomas was selling wine and therefore was at the wedding of Cana as his first exposure to Jesus. But they, over time, end up, he has this love interest with a woman, Nema, who's also following Jesus. And then she dies and this becomes a whole thing. And ultimately they'll have him as, the justification for doubting Thomas. Here's my problem with it. It became too much of a story. It became a distraction. This isn't the story of Thomas. And there's too much time, energy, effort placed into it that's unnecessary. There's whole episodes dedicated to she dies and Jesus doesn't resurrect her from the dead. Why does he not do this is a made up character, not in the Bible. This is there's too much to it. And that violates a rule. So ensure that creative additions enhance the central story and don't become distractions or central features on their own. And then finally, where there exists mystery, leave room for mystery. Which I think is like
don't try to explain everything that wasn't explained.
Exactly. And I think people that do that actually make a mistake. Because one of the things, if you with Lord of the Rings, I'm trying to think of a good example without saying Game of Thrones, but
Star Wars. People hate the midichlorians thing from the prequels.
Right.
Because the Force is mysterious, it's fun, you're not supposed to understand how it works, and they're talking about this
and they try to make
microscopic biological something or other.
Right.
Midichlorians
that you can read.
Are the best. Right, that you can read and
with
it's a scientific thing.
Right.
And
so where there exists mystery, leave room for mystery. And I think within the biblical narrative, within the biblical storytelling, I think The Chosen does a good job with this because they do embrace the miracles of Jesus without trying to provide some explanation for them. They allow the mysterious to remain mysterious. They don't buy it as opposed to the Noah, where they're trying to find out, well, how did they build this boat? Well, we're going to try to explain it. And they use the Nephilim, it's
Not
just this
Nephilim,
crazy thing.
Rock monsters
Or whatever it was. They're trying to explain what should just remain mysterious because that's what the Bible does. You don't have to explain everything. And I think that's a rule. So quick recap, don't contradict the biblical narrative. Be careful when taking license with central storylines, plots, character profiles. Have a credible basis. 3, for your creative license. 4, ensure creative Additions enhance the central storyline and don't distract or become central features. And 5, where there exists mystery, leave room for mystery. I said that there are also a few okays. I'll get to those quickly. It's okay to order storytelling creatively. You don't have to mess with biblical chronology to tell the story in a creative way that might employ some storytelling license. Just because the Bible lays a story out chapter doesn't mean that you can't weave some things together in a creative way to tell a story. I think that that's okay. Having some foreshadowing, but just don't violate the biblical chronology. It's okay, and this is one that might be controversial, but I still follow me. I think it's okay to merge multiple storylines into a central truth. Sometimes the Bible gives way more information than you can really legitimately include in a 50-minute episode. A great example of this is, so the kids and I, we listened to on the way to the beach, The Wild Robot, which is this cool kids book that's been written. We listened to it. And then we watched the first movie. And what they do is they take like 3 characters in the audiobook and they merge them into one character. And we were talking after the movie with the kids. They were like, well, why wasn't this character there or that one? And I was like, well, this character that they kind of, it was really the blending of those 3 because they can't give the backstory. It's not a 3-hour movie, or a 4-hour audiobook's different than a 2-hour movie. And like, I'm okay. Again, you got to follow the rules.
As long as you don't break the first laws.
It's okay.
You can then merge.
It's okay. It's okay to do that. And then lastly, it's okay to add non-textual background to deepen biblical realities. So something might not be in the text itself, but you can add things, archaeological observations, some cultural things. Again, going back to our rules, I think it's okay for you to add things to deepen the story where it's appropriate and necessary. Anything you guys want to add to this, or to the audience, you guys can hit me up, popecreighton@gmail.com. I thought that was a pretty good 5 rules and some okays.
I really like them. I think that's great. I wish the guys who made Wheel of Time had listened to that.
Or any of it.
I think that is
or House of David specifically.
If you don't
and this is where we disagree, because I think they did follow the majority of those rules.
Well, we'll get to that because
I really liked House of David. We're gonna get there.
We're gonna get there. We'll get there now.
Don't mess with the things that matter. Don't change the characters that matter. You'll be okay.
Okay, so
yes.
House of David episode 1 was titled A Shepherd and King. There are several different ways we could approach this. So I asked Judd, we'll start with Spice Daddy. So you have a degree in archaeology. You've spent time in Israel. I want you to avoid getting into like the biblical narrative. I want to try to stay very targeted here.
So
from an archaeological standpoint, cultural, just what was your thoughts?
Which is the first thing I look at when I'm watching.
100%.
When I'm watching something that's a biblical story, I automatically go time period, what was available at that time period, and House David did a really good job. Everything down from the costumes to the materials used to the weapons and stuff that I saw, like everything was time period appropriate.
What did you think of the geography, like the actual locations of filming?
They did a pretty good job of it.
I agree.
So especially,
like The Chosen, you can tell they're in Utah,
right? So, but House of David really did a pretty good job. Obviously, real quick.
Like, and the reason, because you haven't watched it.
Well, I haven't watched the shows. I thought that was very funny. What do you mean?
There's like a whole bunch of again, there are snow-capped mountains in Israel, but not in certain areas where they were filming, and you have like literally the Cascades in the distance. Again, they filmed it in Utah. They had to do what they had to do, but those type of things.
Which is one of the things I worry about at the beginning.
Yes.
And obviously geography changes over time. But specifically when I was they are going
in
to
Israel.
school.
In Israel, yeah.
I dug in the opening scene where the David's fighting Goliath. I dug in that valley area.
Yeah, I've been there.
And so like they did a pretty accurate job getting like the
CGI scene where they're looking at the valley.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not that big of a valley, which I was expecting. Usually when we as Americans or Westerners view a valley, we think a big wide open valley with some mountains off in the distance. They had smaller hills, smaller mountains, did a good job. It seemed like the shrubbery and the trees and stuff like that was pretty close to
There
what
might
you
have been more trees back then.
there might have been more
Yeah.
trees back then, but they did a good job getting the landscape down. What really impressed me was the small things that they did.
Okay.
And a lot of people don't know this, and going through it right now through your sermon series is the Philistines had iron. The majority of Israel did not.
Yeah.
And in the opening scene, you see people fighting with pitchforks and stuff like that,
And wood axes and sickles.
and just that tiny aspect of it
100%.
was like they did their research, and they're doing even down to the armor that the Israelites were wearing was pretty impressive to me. It wasn't elaborate; it was usually like leather kind of things. Like they did a really good job with it.
I have a question for you about that. Do you think that was the type of lion that would have been native to the area?
Yeah, so lions had a pretty pervasive.
I wasn't sure if it was a mountain lion because the Bible just says it's a lion.
Lions had a really up until like really 1800 were all the way up into Asia and into Europe.
So that type of a Maine lion,
and in
like
fact,
your shirt, like your shirt.
So in fact, Judean lions were known, like the Asian lions. Those lions were known to be even more aggressive than sub-Saharan African lions.
So that whole was very that was
Very
accurate,
accurate.
very accurate. What about like their dwelling place? You know, David's home.
Pretty accurate.
That's what that would have looked like.
Yep.
So as far as if we were going from archaeology, cultural, like those superficial things, you give an A+.
Yeah, even down to like I'm trying to remember because I did binge watch the first three episodes by accident. But they the way they were talking about certain things was pretty accurate. The way they handled the Philistine stuff, the I think in the first episode they get into their fight with the Amalekites.
Yes.
The way they handled that was something that the Jews would have done during that time. So
yeah, well, I mean, that's 1 Samuel 15.
right, and down to the I guess this kind of gets more into the character development stuff. Like David, the only thing that I have a disagreement with, and it's not really a disagreement, but kind of traditional Jewish viewership of David was that he was a ginger.
Okay, we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
So,
no, I've got
that's kind of like an aside.
No, I've got a whole page of stuff.
Right.
So,
but I do like the way they. I kind of like the way they presented Samuel.
yes. Okay. So we're gonna get to that, and and
as
we
far
go,
as archaeology goes, I would say it's pretty dead on.
The ginger thing, Zach mentioned that to me the other day. I did not know.
we'll get to that. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. I've got that on my list. The let me ask in regards to oh man, how do I want to phrase this? The cinematography. So you are notorious for watching a lot of really terrible Christian movies.
In fact, I think I might start a YouTube
I think it's
thing
a great
where kind of like
We'll make it part of Outlaw Radio.
Mystery Science Theater 3000, but have me sitting there
Look,
watching.
I think
those
the more
Yes.
programming we can get for Outlaw, the better.
We need a Spice
Yes.
Daddy review of terrible. We might need to do like the worst Christian movies episode and but like from the cinematography, I thought it was
pretty good,
very well done.
Yeah.
I really, really like the cinematography.
Yes.
I mean, even down to the
Camera uses, lighting,
Right.
like just some of the superficial stuff. It was very
even,
well done.
But even like the fight scenes,
yeah.
like they did a really good job.
The acting was great.
Yeah. Do not watch it with your kids, not for like sexual content or anything.
we'll get to that. Ask me that towards the end because I forgot about that, but bring that up later.
I thought the acting was great. I noticed it this most recent time in like the opening monologue. There's a shot of Saul where Michael's talking about the kingdom being ripped away from him. And you can see him like he sits down on the throne. And from the way the actor is portraying Saul, he looks very like you can see the paranoia starting in his eyes. I thought he did a great job. The guy who plays Saul nailed it.
Yeah, so let's
even to being a foot taller than everybody else.
Yeah,
Like,
they
I thought they did a really good job
did.
with that. Yeah.
So, Creighton, why don't I go through a bunch of stuff here, and then when it correlates to your list, jump in, and then mark off so that if there's something on your list that's not on mine, we can get to that.
I can do that.
Okay. Let's start with likes. Let's just purely start with things we liked about it. I liked the fact that it was very Jewish.
Yes.
I liked the fact that there was a Hebrew text that would flip to English. I like the fact that I like the fact that they sang. There was that sing where they sang in Hebrew. I like the fact that they didn't try to go super trendy and have it all in Hebrew with English subtitles, which would have just been the creative thing to do, but been stupid. I like the fact that they Englishized certain names, primarily David, because I'm sure that there was a conversation where it was like, well, technically it would be David, but everybody says David. Now you can say it however you want, but like, I'm just glad that they didn't get super pretentious and like have it like David, David, and like nobody says that. Just say David, please.
Even with Samuel, like some people would say Samuel and some people would say Samuel.
Right.
And
They didn't. They had a Hebrew vibe, but they didn't like over Jew it.
It was that's a terrible way to put that. I would say it felt very Jewish, but it was not off-putting.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. Totally agree with that. Again, I had great battle sequences, cinematography. I had one note. You made the comment, I hope Goliath is big.
Oh yeah, that was.
And
Vinny messaged me while I was at work, and he's like, "You got your wish." I was like, "Dude, I got a lot of wishes. What did I wish? I don't know what I did." He was like, "He's at least 10 feet tall." I'm like, "Dude, spoiler alerts."
Spoilers.
So I love we'll get to Goliath a little bit more. I like the fact that they had Hebrew actors. At least they were Middle Eastern actors. But then I like the fact that Goliath and the Philistines seemed to be more Anglo.
They looked much whiter.
Whiter.
When I watched it back,
Almost
I was
like they were
sure.
Greek.
Almost
Right.
like like the Philistines came from Greece. But again, those were like the small details where like I liked that a lot.
They could have easily dropped that and nobody would have noticed, except for the people that care.
And I love the fact that with Goliath, they added in the mystery to him, like on two different occasions. Like when there's the handprint up on the wall, and Jonathan makes there were giants in the earth in those days,
yeah.
and then Saul will even make the comment like there haven't been giants since the days of Joshua, and again they say Joshua, like they just use Joshua, but like I like the fact that not only did they present Goliath, I think accurately, but they presented him. They left the Nephilim mysterious, like that they're giants, but that there's something to this without defining it. Now maybe they define it later on, maybe they get into that later. You can't say anything because you've watched a couple episodes, but I like that.
Don't make that face either.
I loved Saul. Again, I think we can agree with that.
Absolutely. He did a great job.
I love Saul. It took me watching it again to pick up on who he was. I think he'll become more of a character later on because he's an actual notable character. The guy that's the actual actor is Abner. I like the guy that plays Abner. And he comes up and he's like, hey, like when
Is he the one that
Agag's
asked
there.
why Agag
why
is
is
there?
he here?
Gotcha.
But I like Abner becomes a baller, like in the biblical narrative. I don't know if he's a notable actor, so he's got to be. They got to play him out.
I like how Saul, like you see his development. You see that, like you're going through the sermon, the Samuel now. You see how good he is, but you start seeing that pride creep in.
Yes,
and they do a really good job of developing.
They embrace the dichotomy that is Saul. Like they add depth to him. Jonathan, they knocked it out of the park.
Agreed.
I loved Jonathan. I also thought that it was very interesting, and we'll see how it plays out. But the narrator is Michael, which again I liked because she becomes the first wife of David. I thought that was a creative thing to add in.
I like how they give her more depth and.
Yes,
and that they
there's a lot of depth in Scripture. We're going to get to this, but
but
they
you don't
give
get
her
a whole lot from the woman aspect of things. They just kind of throw names out there, and they don't really go further than that.
I
and
agree
I think
with
they do. They don't just make her an arranged marriage, kind of throw it out there. This is who you married, and
well, she was in love with him. That was a thing.
Right.
That goes back to it. You were going to say something.
I have like 2 issues with her narration. One at the very beginning of the
Well,
episode.
we're going to get to
end.
the problems.
Okay.
We're
You're right.
in
We're
what
just
we
going
like.
good. We're just going good.
We're
You're
just
right.
going
You're
good.
Right.
That's
We're just
half,
talking about
that's
good
half
stuff.
the page.
Okay.
I just want to say that both of these guys are negative Nancy's when it comes to these Christian movies and stuff.
I'm negative Nancy's about everything.
Yeah,
Where's
he
my
is.
camera?
And
That one.
and that's why I love Christian movies so much, because I can look past that.
Hey, I can too, but I am pedantic.
Yeah, you hate Christmas. We can't trust you with
I
anything.
do hate Christmas.
So I don't know if you guys picked up on this subtle detail, but so David is a man after God's own heart, right? And how do they introduce him to the story? Aside from the opening scene, but like they introduce him leaving the 99 to go after the one. I don't know if you guys picked up on that.
Oh, now that you say it, that is exactly what he was doing.
Yeah.
So that's cute. I like
which
that.
I thought again, the heart of God, leaving the flock to go after the one. I liked that. I liked the scene, just the insight of when he comes back with the injured lamb, and you have Jesse passing along the oral traditions of the stories. Like that's how a Jewish knight would have been, talking about the legends of old, talking about the stories of old. I like that detail. I like the fact that they followed biblical chronology, within the story itself. Now we'll see how that plays out longer. I liked Saul's family dynamic, which again, this might be he was married to one woman. They introduce his wife, daughters, sons. We're not given any information other than Jonathan and Michael. We're not given any background to the other characters, but like having some creative license with the other son who's like playing womanizer, not really taking the kingly thing serious. I'm okay with that. Like, again, don't make him a main character. You make him a main character, we have a problem. But like doing that to add some texture to it, it enhanced Jonathan's integrity, his character, the fact that Jonathan's out fighting.
It gave me vibes of the parable of the son, the prodigal son, like
that's
that.
interesting, yeah.
Almost like that kind of vibe, where the firstborn son, aka Jonathan, doing everything right, and then the prodigal son is a secondborn, and he's
doing
kind
everything
of
wrong,
doing everything, kind of going out there and partying. Kind of thing. That's
Again, we're going to go long tonight. If you got to bail, that's fine. These videos get archived. The audio will get released tomorrow. The long format, we don't have a time constraint.
you guys like hanging out with us anyway. So
That's right.
matter.
I liked the at first, Creighton, you and I talked, and I didn't like it. And then I've been studying this chapter this week. And I like the monument, the Ebenezer that Saul establishes. That's biblical. Like he set up a monument for himself.
Really?
That's in the text. That's actually a textual thing.
Justin, stop waggling your head at me like that.
It's in the text. And at first I thought that was an addition, but it's a legitimate thing that Samuel sees. Like and it was to himself for the war. That was it was a great presentation of what an Ebenezer would have looked like, why it would have been there. But then even the division of the spoils of war, And this was the story where like he had been told to kill everything and he doesn't. And
Kill
he'll
everything and burn everything else.
and he'll blame it on the people. The people made me do it. He'll make excuses, but like you get the vibe of like, again, the spoils of war was how warriors got paid. Dividing up the spoils was like honoring the tribes. I like the way that they did all that.
I like how like Jonathan and I'm trying not to give a spoiler. I think David in that might have been that first scene or something like in the first episode, like how they handle those spoils, because they come up and like, why do we have this stuff? This is cursed.
They do
Yes.
that. Jonathan
Yeah.
says that, and he's like, "Hey, this is the politics.
Right.
Aaliyah Shab. Or
This
whatever.
is the
like,
politics of it."
We were ordered. Samuel said to burn
Yes.
it all.
I love Samuel. And what's funny is I was listening to a Bible study by Joe Foch in 1 Samuel 15, going back to this like 2012, and he describes Samuel as like this old guy with like a long white beard that looks like Gandalf. And I was like, boom, you nailed it. That's exactly
Not just that, but like the whole vibe of like
how serious he was
he's serious,
and
but,
heartfelt and like
you almost view him as just the crazy old man, but at the same time,
Dude,
you
his vibe. I personally thought he was a little bit too Gandalf the Grey for my liking.
I loved it.
I loved it too.
But that's just visually. His vibe,
Dude, he's like, you shall
the
not pass.
intensity in his
constantly.
Thou
eyes.
shalt not pass.
Yeah,
Putting down the
intensity in his
rod.
eyes.
Yes.
When we first see him leaving where he's praying to the Lord, and he's
The
like, I
high
have to
place
go
at
do-
Bethel. That would have been a place, yeah.
and he's putting on his robe and he grabs and he starts and his
Assistant's like,
"You're
"Wear your shoes."
your
Yes.
shoes."
Yes. I
That was
like
great.
I like the line where he goes in that same scene where he goes, the assistant's like, "Where are we going?" He goes, "To unmake what has been made."
Yes.
Wonder where they got that line.
That's not in the Bible, but it's a good it's a good line. I like
What?
I like Samuel and Saul's interaction. Like that whole scene, that was the best part of the episode towards the end.
Easy, and a bunch of that is lifted straight out of the New King James.
I like how-
the entire
Yes.
to obey is better than sacrifice monologue is straight
it's
out of
straight
the text.
scriptural.
It's awesome.
But even when Saul's like, when Samuel just shows up and the party's there, and Saul like leans in and is like, "Hey, speak with me alone." It is a private conversation that happens. Like that's biblical. When Saul says,
What can be unburdened by what has been?
"Oh my God, that's funny," that's funny. But like I thought the line, and again, this is where some creative license is fine. But when Samuel goes, "I've loved you like a son," and Saul replies, "Your sons did not love you," was like, again, that's not a biblical thing, but I'm okay with the license. There's some because that is a biblical thing. The Samuel's curse was verbatim. I liked the whole the Spirit of God's removed from you, and he hands him over to distressed spirits. Like that whole kind of scene. Again, there's a lot of mystery to how that plays itself out scripturally.
That's
I
one
liked
thing.
it.
That's one thing I didn't really like. I felt
Okay.
like that was a little bit too borderline mystical.
I think that
almost.
there's something mystical
But
to it, though.
I didn't like absolutely hate it, but it was one of those things where I was like, I don't know about that.
I kind of like again. There was license involved. It doesn't violate my rules, and so like I'm okay with it.
That one I was fine with.
Again, Samuel killing Agag
Yeah,
was biblical.
great.
Yes.
The entire time that Samuel's having the conversation with Saul, I'm kind of like surreptitiously
Like, please
looking,
do this,
looking
please,
at
yeah.
to see how much more time is in the episode. Because I'm like, please have him hack up Agag.
I was worried they weren't because they have him leave the tent. I'm like, oh
I
no.
was like, oh come on, you're gonna.
and he
wuss
goes,
out on
and
this?
then he goes back in, and they set it up well because they have Abner earlier on lean into Saul's like, this is an abomination. Why is he here? He shouldn't be here. And then Saul's answer is like, he's humiliation. He should be at my feet. Was his retort.
right.
And I love the fact that he didn't just like ram him through with the sword, but then he proceeds to hack him
To
up.
literally hack him up.
Blood's everywhere.
Didn't see that one coming.
And then
at all.
he like drags the sword behind him. I will say though, and I didn't think about this until I was studying. David Guzik makes the point that more than likely Samuel wouldn't have killed Saul with a sword because he wasn't a warrior. That wouldn't,
Samuel wouldn't have killed Agag with a sword.
Samuel would not have killed Agag with Agag's sword. That's not in the scripture.
Probably would have used a staff.
Or
beat
with
his head in.
no, or with a sword at all. What would he have used? Well, he was a priest. Samuel knew how to butcher something, but it would have been more personal. He would have used a dagger, and he would have cut the carotid and then started to hack him up with a blade. Like it would have been
But in
like a
that-
dagger.
but
Like
in
he
that
was
scene,
dissecting him.
like a dagger man.
but also in that scene, he used his own sword against him.
Yes, which again is
that
not
was a
biblical. And I'm
creative-
fine. I'm
yeah.
fine with it. Like I'm fine with it. My only point: you could have made it more bloody. Like you could have really.
They
did
went
good.
further than I thought they were going to go.
I really
which
liked
was
it.
great.
I thought it was great.
And then I like the fact. So like the next chapter opens. So and this is where we can play the rules, right? So the next like Samuel leaves and goes home, and some time passes. Saul goes someplace else, whatever. They don't leave the time gap because then the next chapter after some time passes is where the Lord comes to Samuel and says, "Hey, quit grieving over Saul. I'm going to send you to get a king." So there's like time, and this is where it works. But from the scene, like the episode ends, which I loved, where like the servant's like, "Where are we going? Where are we going now?" And he replies, "To find a king." And that's how it ends, which I thought, again, there's license there. That's not exactly how that would have happened, but that doesn't violate any of the rules, which I liked. Anything you liked, I didn't mention, either of you guys, before we get to dislikes.
I think you've mentioned all the things that I had.
I really liked how they played into. I'm trying to not mix up my episodes now.
Yeah, that's why you can't do that.
Yeah, I know. Maybe I'll just stay quiet for this
You
episode.
great fool. No,
I like how they leaned into David's musical talents
Okay.
from the very beginning.
that
okay.
I would like to get into, but I want to get into things I don't like
Okay,
to get
think
into that.
that-
Yeah.
All right. We're going to have to say, I thought that worked well. So I'm just going to run down my list, add on, jump in. Things I didn't like. And Justin is right. Spice Daddy's right. I'm a critic. I'm a critic about everything. It doesn't just have to be like I'm a glass half empty type dude. What I didn't like right from the beginning, stupid disclaimer. Don't give me a disclaimer. Like right from the beginning, the opening disclaimer, they had the text. What you're seeing might not be biblical. It might be
That's
this blah blah
right,
blah blah
yeah.
blah. And I'm like, don't do that. Like,
See, but I think
like you're right from the beginning telling me that you're gonna screw this up. Just don't let me know right from the beginning.
I don't think so. I think that forces people that wouldn't otherwise read the Bible or have never experienced that story to go back and like, oh, what is the real story, and then possibly go.
It's
back
the
and
same thing with the Mary thing. You think you know my story, but you don't. When you open it with
Yeah.
like, for me, if we weren't doing this, I might have been like, oh,
Done.
I'm not going to watch this. You open with the disclaimer telling me you're going to tick me off. That's how I
get
read
that,
it.
yeah.
I didn't like it. Just don't do it. Put it at the end.
Didn't bother me.
I did not read it.
Yeah. Second thing, this is, you guys are going to laugh. David's ugly, man. Dude, the actor fell off the turnip truck. He's one ugly looking dude, which completely doesn't work with the biblical
Interesting.
narrative because in chapter
He's supposed to be
16,
ruddy and handsome.
he's
I don't know what
ruddy.
ruddy means.
Ruddy means red.
Ginger.
That's
Oh,
where we
ruddy
get red.
means red?
It's literally in Hebrew, he's red,
I
which
did not
could be
know
his
that.
complexion that he's young, but a lot of scholars think that he was redheaded.
He was a ginger.
Ginger.
That he was a ginger. That he
Which
was.
there is some historical basis for a group of Hebrews
there are lots
being
of
gingers.
Redheads in the Jewish community.
And
in
we're told that
America.
he was very good looking.
right.
They did not cast the right kid.
I thought he looked fine.
Dude looked like he got hit in the face a few times.
Maybe
Well,
he's gonna
Even
maybe,
Jessica said that, like, he's supposed to be good looking.
maybe
isn't
he's
he?
gonna grow into it though.
No, that face. You don't grow into that face. Just saying. Hey, I don't know the kid.
Yeah,
whatever.
I
but I'm just
didn't-
saying.
I didn't catch that at all.
I put that on my list. Was not handsome or good looking. I don't like how they established the story. Like right from the beginning, there's this quote that the people were leaderless and divided. That's not true. Samuel was the judge. They had a leader. His name was Samuel, and they were actually unified and not divided, but they were worried about what was going to happen after Samuel.
But if the narrator is Michal and her father being Saul, wouldn't that be coming from the perspective of most of the?
But that wasn't how. Like, first, you don't know who the narrator is to begin with.
Right. The narrator came off as third person omniscient,
but that's
Yes, I
that's aside from the point. If the
Well, then they
person
made a
telling the
mistake. Then they
story-
made a mistake doing that. They should have introduced the narrator.
that
Right.
becomes later
because they
on.
changed the tense then.
because
No,
I have
that-
multiple issues with Michael's McCall. You said
That's
her
Michael.
name.
Her name is Michael.
Michal.
Whatever. Michal. I have multiple issues with her narration. Because the other thing is that in the opening, her thing made it seem that David became king on his merits.
Well, like
Which I really didn't like.
she closes saying, "quote The rise of David would cost my family everything." That's factually untrue.
Right.
Like, that's not the story.
David had nothing to do with her family losing everything.
The story
It
is
was everything
Saul
is
being
Saul.
an idiot
Yes.
and God removing it, and then again, it violates the backstory of, like, Saul's already had Samuel rebuke him, say he's going to take the kingdom from him. David's not
Right.
even born yet.
It
Like,
also
David
has
has nothing to do with it.
It also violates the fact that Michal becomes
Michael, let's just call her Michael. Her
Whatever.
name's Michael.
Can't do
Justin
it.
threw me off. It also violates the fact that, like, she is going to grow to love him. So why would she see him as the fall of her family?
Well, she will come to hate him.
Well, she'll love him first.
Like, the full story. But again, this is where the narration gets who is this? What tense
which
is this?
Michael is
But
it?
this is
That's-
from the very first episode, though. You can't expect.
But the
them
very
to establish
first-
that
the
later
very-
on.
She's talking from third person omniscient.
Yeah.
But
I
that's what I'm
agree.
saying. That becomes a character development in and
Okay,
of itself.
2 verse 1, we win.
I didn't like it.
2 verse 1, we win.
wrong.
I'm with you. So
She also calls Samuel the last great seer.
Okay, that's the
and
next
I hate
thing.
That.
That's
I
the
hate
next
it
thing.
so much.
not only does she call Samuel the last of the seers, which the Bible even defines seers as the prophets,
Right.
but then later Saul will call him the first of the prophets. Saul actually calls him later in the episode the first of the prophets. He was the last of the judges,
First of the prophets.
first of the seers / prophets.
He's not even the last seer in David's story.
Oh my goodness, you got Nathan, and then you've got Isaiah, Jeremiah. You got, like, all of the prophets
them.
that come later. Again, that's an unforced, like, whoever is advising the biblical
That's
angle
an
of this.
editor error. Somebody just
complete-
didn't read through that and understand what they were reading.
Absolutely. That was a complete unbiblical miss. Whether it's the perspective or not, factually speaking, he's the first of the prophets and the last of the judges. And they blew that.
Calling him the last great seer is just, it upsets me.
Let's also not overlook the fact that there is zero. This goes back to, like, you have to have some basis for something. You can't make crap up out of thin air. David is not injured by Goliath in any context of, like, there's no legend of that. That doesn't happen in the Bible. He's not injured by Goliath throwing a spear where he's, like, bleeding out on the ground. Like, that's complete nonsense.
That hasn't even gotten in that little bit of the first episode.
Well, spoilers.
It doesn't even matter.
But like the opening,
You open with a
crawl
scene where it's like,
has
that's not-
David getting, like, hit and he's on the ground. I agree. I'm worried that we're going to get to the fight, like, whenever it happens in the season.
I just didn't like it. It
And
doesn't
David is
happen.
gonna
It doesn't like
win.
it.
He's going to win in some way that is, like,
Okay.
trickery.
Okay, let me.
which I don't
you,
like.
You don't need to do that. Like, that doesn't enhance the story. You can use license to enhance the story. That doesn't enhance it. It takes away from God being the one that yields a victory, not some ingenuity, not some trick of David, not any of that. It's like, dude takes a stone, throws it in the name of the Lord. I did not like that at all. Also, the line, one stone changes the course of history.
Didn't like that.
That's stupid. Because it doesn't, like, that's not what changes the course of history at all.
God does.
Yeah, David was anointed before he threw a stone.
Right.
So I didn't like that. Let's also get real. The David's mother controversy.
That is one thing that I did not.
What are we talking about?
Why? I don't know why they would add that.
That is one thing I do.
They come after his parentage and his musicality.
Okay, well, first,
Weird choice.
like he even calls himself that he's the bastard in this house. So there's not even an ambiguity to it. The implications clearly stated is that he's the half brother of his brothers, and he was conceived by a concubine. At best, a concubine. There's no biblical evidence for that, nor is there. I grokked it just to see what Gronk would say. Gronk's like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Like, there's nothing to validate that, substantiate that.
It gets weirder.
I know.
Good.
Yeah. But so
It's not terrible, but it gets weirder.
So I think that that's just, again, going back to my rules, don't mess with the main character. What does that do to enhance it? He's the youngest. Like, again,
I guess what they were going for, the only thing that I can think, is that like when Samuel comes to see the sons of Jesse, he gets left out. And then when David goes to see his brothers at the front lines, they talk to him in like a kind of a rough way.
Listen,
I guess they were playing off of that they were trying to build up this.
the brothers have an animosity with him. That's fine.
Right.
That being because of his mother is never part of the story.
The weird thing
and then the
against
idea-
his music is weird.
Well, and then the idea is that his spiritual heritage also comes from his mother and not Jesse. Again,
Right.
that's weird. It's true David will have a very complicated relationship with women, but at the same time, like, again, I was appalled by that. That was, again, there's no basis for it. I thought it was strange. Again, there's nothing in the Bible that says that there's a stigma about his musical ability.
Right.
Because later on, when Saul is having this distressed spirit, and they're like, his advisors are like, we need to get somebody. David has a reputation in Bethlehem as being a wonderful musician. Like, he's got to, like even just his having a negative reputation with the people in Bethlehem, there's no basis for that either.
Well, I hate to skip ahead and do.
You can't skip ahead. No, you can't do it.
About anything in episode 2 or 3.
They address
That's-
that issue.
It doesn't matter. We're only at episode 1.
We're dealing with episode 1.
You cheated, and that's your fault.
I did not cheat. You just said, "Hey, watch it." I didn't
No,
know
I
they were
didn't.
gonna have all three episodes.
No, I didn't.
We had
Very
a conversation
specific.
about it on the Slack.
It's recorded.
Dude, I work till 9.
Okay.
Don't get home till 10.
Okay, here's
it's
another one. I don't like the fact that they made the Amalekites and King Agag being like crazy and demonized.
Agreed.
They called them the blood drinkers. They called him the witch king. They called them cannibals and sorcerers. And I did some digging on this because, again, I'm studying this passage. First, we don't have any non-biblical archaeological evidence of the Amalekites ever existing. They were a nomadic tribe that were exterminated. But there's no biblical evidence. Like, they were brutal people because they did attack Israel on the backside when they were coming from the land of Egypt, which is why God wants Saul to destroy them. They were wicked people. But, like, you know, I felt like that the writers tried to make them these demon people to then somehow like try to justify God wanting Saul to kill them all. When, like, literally in the passage we're told why God wanted to kill them. It's because what they did 450 years before. So it's like you can try to sugarcoat it. It's a brutal thing, but like they tried to make the audience more sympathetic to the execution of these people by making them cannibal, witch doctors, crazy people. And I didn't like that because, again, you can there's creative license, but you can't make things up. You got to have something to validate it.
It's like a weird form of whitewashing where you're like blood washing it to make it more palatable that we're wiping them out.
I didn't like that. Give you another one I didn't like.
it at all.
This deep love and affinity that Saul and Jonathan have for each other is completely void from the biblical text because the chapter before, Jonathan completely defies his father, goes up and fights. Saul wants to kill his son.
And he has to be stopped.
It has to be stopped by the people. And then what moves forward, like Jonathan was the commander, like chapter 14 opens, chapter 14 opens with Saul having 2,000 men and Jonathan having 1,000.
Spoiler alert.
There's no mention of Abner at all as being the commander of the armies. After that whole story, at the end of the chapter, Jonathan's no longer commander of the armies. Abner is. Meaning that throughout the whole thing that happens, not only does Saul want to kill his son and the people have to rise up and revolt for it, but then Jonathan seems to kind of get demoted. Like he's never in charge of a bunch of people. Like the idea that they present within it, that Saul's like, my son's going to be the next king. Like they even do a toast to Jonathan being a great king. And like, again, that is just that. In fact, what makes it an unforced error is like the Bible actually presents a more compelling, convoluted storyline that they're missing. Like if you play the story out, like you go the other direction, you have more controversy, depth, development. I didn't like when you're introduced to Samuel, I didn't like his cutting scars.
Yeah, that's a very weird thing.
Because again, that's not
a God of the Bible
That's
thing.
not a thing. Yeah. Other than that,
I've got one more.
You got one more.
And it upset me as soon as I heard it.
Okay.
And this one, it might be a bit pedantic, but there's a scene where David is right before he chases after the lion. He says, "I'm done waiting," or something to that effect. And it's like, no, you're not. The next 20 years of your life is waiting.
You're going
And
to be
it's
waiting for
very important for your character.
Yeah, that's
that
interesting.
You are running to wait for a long time. And I heard it and I was like, that can't be what he just said, right? Because it doesn't make any sense.
No,
I really didn't like that one.
Yeah.
But again, it's kind of pedantic, but I was just like,
And again, the Bible says that he killed the lion and the bear and like I don't have any problems with the lion being introduced as a story and all that,
Agreed.
but like the it's my time type of a deal.
it's my time type of thing is very
It's weird.
antithetical to the entire David Saul relationship.
Yeah.
The whole thing is that David's whole thing is that he does not feel like it is his time to take. Like this is the Lord's anointed.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. No, I agree with that. Well, we good? We
Other than that, I really
that's
liked
the
it.
review of the
Everything
first.
I mean, the only thing I have is, are y'all going to catch up? Because
No, we're gonna watch the next
No, we're gonna watch the next one
next
episode.
week.
Y'all are going to be like 5 episodes behind me.
No, you're
I'm watching it on Thursday.
Well, then you need to go back and rewatch the second one.
wow.
Speaking of next week, actually,
Yeah, we won't even
Yeah.
be doing this next week.
well, we will do it next week. We'll have to do it like afterwards. We're gonna have a Honduras recap next week. These guys went on a mission trip to Honduras. Our brother Kenny, Nikki, they're doing a great thing. Whole group. We're gonna actually have the whole team. We're gonna be moving in multiple groups. Next week's gonna be a lot of fun. We're gonna show a lot of videos, share what God's doing in Honduras. So please join us. With all that being said, man, thanks so much for joining us for the Outlaw Radio Show. If you're watching, check out the podcast. It gets released on Thursdays tomorrow. Audio on Apple, Google, Spotify, really any platform that you get your podcasting. If you're listening, check out the live stream. We stream the show 8 o'clock Wednesday nights on x.com/Zach_Adams. Our YouTube channel is outlawradio.live, and we also stream on facebook.com/The Radio Outlaw. Hope you guys have a great week. We'll see you guys next Wednesday.